Welcome to my first YouTube video. Are you a guitarist who hasn't yet memorized the 5 pentatonic forms? Well, if so, this video may save you a lot of effort because I'm going to show you how there is really only one pentatonic form and it is hiding within plain sight in the other 4. Some of what I'm going to present is in other videos, but I have not seen a video yet that presents exactly what I am presenting. So with that, let's begin. These are the 5 pentatonic forms that are most commonly used. Sometimes they're labeled differently. For example, I have seen pattern 5 called pattern 1 and pattern 1 called pattern 2, etc. It doesn't really matter. But in this video, I will be calling this pattern pattern 1. But where do the 5 forms originate from? In other words, how did we come up with them? Well, let's look at the minor pentatonic scale. We start with our root note. To get to the second note in the pentatonic scale, we move 3 half steps up. Then we go to the next note, which is 2 half steps up from there. To the 4th note, which is 2 half steps up from there. Then finally to the 5th note, which is 3 half steps up from there. 2 half steps up further brings us back to the root note, but 1 octave higher. And this is the pattern of the minor pentatonic scale, and it repeats itself all over the fretboard over and over. Now let's see how we do these 3 half step and 2 half step moves on the fretboard. So we draw ourselves a fretboard and we start with a note. Well, clearly we can move up 3 half steps simply by moving up the fretboard 3 half steps, 3 frets. But another way of doing it is to move up a string and then down the fretboard 2 frets. This is also a 3 half step move. 2 simple ways to move 3 half steps. Now, in the minor pentatonic scale, we have distances of 3 half steps and distances of 2 half steps. So we have to learn how to do 2 half steps too. So we draw again our fretboard. We start with a note. Clearly, you can move 2 half steps this way. And then to move 2 half steps while moving up a string, we can do it that way. So now, let's apply what we know to create a pattern. We draw our fretboard, and we start with our root note. Move up 3 half steps to our second note. Move up 2 half steps to our third note. 2 more half steps up to our 4th note. 3 half steps to our 5th note. 2 half steps to our new root. 3 half steps to the second note. 2 half steps to the third. 2 half steps to the 4th. Now, that may have looked like a 3 half step move, but remember, the B string is tuned 1 half step low compared to the G string, so we have to account for that. Our next note, our next note, and our next note. Now, if you look at the pattern we just created, it might look familiar, and in fact, it is exactly what we're calling pattern 1. Okay, fine. Now, what if we apply this same thing, but we're going to start on the 5th string rather than on the 6th string? So again, we draw our fretboard. We put in our root note, our second note, our third note, our 4th note, and we're just following the same pattern as before. 5th note, back to our root, second, and again we're counting for the fact that the B string is tuned lower by half a step. Our next note, our next note, and our next note. Now, you notice we haven't drawn anything on the sixth string. This is okay. I'm going to get into this later. It's probably not important that you memorize what's on the sixth string. You just know to move forward from the fifth string, apply your pattern 1 until you get to the first string. But we're going to fill these notes in anyway. So from the first note, we go back to our fifth note, and from our fifth, backfill to our fourth note. But if we compare this with what we're calling pattern 4, we find they're identical. So pattern 4 is really just pattern 1, but started on the fifth string. Let's do the same thing for the fourth string. Draw our fretboard, our root, our second, our third note, our fourth note, our fifth note, back to our root, the second, to the third, then backfilling up the fifth and sixth strings. Again, it's not particularly useful to memorize what's on the fifth or sixth string for this, and I'll explain why later. At least if you're not a professional musician, it's probably not important. If you are a professional musician, you're only watching this video for entertainment. You probably have already memorized your 5 pentatonic scales. So we fill in, and if we compare this, guess what? It's pattern 2. So pattern 2 is just pattern 1 started on the fourth string. What if we start on the third string? Root, second note, third note, fourth note, fifth note, back to the root, and going backwards, fifth note, fourth, third, second, first, back to the fifth. We can compare this with pattern 5. So, again, if we apply pattern 1, but start on the third string, we get pattern 5. Starting to probably get the point here. All the patterns are really just pattern 1, just started on a different string. Finally, we're going to apply pattern 1, but on the second string. Root note, second, third, and fourth. Then going back, fifth note, fourth, third, second, root, fifth, fourth, third. Identical to pattern 3. All right, so let's just tie this all together. For pattern 1, you apply the pattern 1, of course, to the sixth string, starting on the sixth string. For pattern 2, you apply pattern 1 again, just start on the fourth string. For pattern 3, you apply pattern 1 again, but start on the second string. For pattern 4, apply pattern 1 starting on the fifth string. And for pattern 5, apply pattern 1, but start on the third string. So let's do a sample application of this. Suppose we are improvising in the G minor pentatonic scale. So if we're going to improvise, we probably want the widest range of notes possible, from the lowest note to the highest note that we can reach on our particular guitar. So let's see what notes are in the G minor pentatonic. Well, of course, we're going to start with G. We move up 3 half steps, which gets us to A sharp. 2 more half steps gets us to C. 2 more half steps get us to D. 3 half steps get us to F. And of course, 2 more half steps get us back to G. So you want the widest range of notes possible. So in order to get that, you're always going to start one pattern on the sixth string as close as possible to the nut. This gives you a very wide range of frequencies and starts with the lowest possible note. Now, sometimes you can start just as low if you start on the fifth string. However, you won't be able to go up as high. So you're better off starting on the sixth string. And this is just your pattern one. This is probably the pattern you've already memorized. And in fact, as you now realize, you've actually already memorized all the patterns. You maybe just didn't know it yet. Then what you want to do is find the highest fret on the high E string that you can actually reach. So for me, if I'm playing my 14th fret acoustic guitar, that would be the 14th fret on the high E. So I find that, and it's an F sharp. However, F sharp is not in the G minor pentatonic scale. So I need to find the next lowest note that is as high as I can get. And of course, that's the F. Now, the next thing you want to do is determine what note, the first, the second, third, fourth, or fifth, this is. So it's the F, and I'm in the G minor pentatonic. So that would be the fifth note in the pentatonic. Now you want to find the pattern that has that note in the same position. So there's my note. It's on the 13th fret of the high E, and it's the fifth note in the pentatonic. So what pattern puts the note there? Well, if we compare that with pattern 4, it lines up with that. All right, so now I know I need pattern 4, but I'm thinking I don't really know what pattern 4 is. I only know what pattern 1 is. So now what we want to do is find what string do we want to start pattern 1 on so that it becomes pattern 4. So we go back to what I said earlier. So for pattern 1, you apply pattern 1 starting on the 6th. For pattern 2, apply pattern 1 starting on the 4th. For pattern 3, start pattern 1 on the 2nd. And for pattern 4, which is the pattern we decided we needed, we simply apply pattern 1 starting on the 5th string. So we do this, and we populate our pattern 1 on the 5th string so that the 5th note will fall on that 13th fret. It sounds more complicated than it is. If you actually practice this a couple times, it's not hard at all. In fact, when I came up with this idea, it took me all of 3 or 4 minutes before I was improvising in whatever pattern I wanted. And at the time I came up with this idea, I only knew one pattern. Filling these guys in. And there you have it. These are the notes that you would want to use if you were playing on my guitar, where I can only fret up to the 14th fret, and you were in the G minor and you wanted to play the G minor pentatonic. And this will cover every note on the fretboard in that pentatonic. Now I have a few final thoughts. And again, I've covered this before, but I just want to reinforce it. From a practical standpoint, it's enough to just memorize the entire pattern 1, starting on the 6th string as close to the nut as you can. This is where you're probably going to be playing most of the time anyway. You'll only have one other pattern that you need. And you don't need to think about if that pattern starts on string 3 or string 4, don't worry about what happens on the higher strings, the higher numbered strings, that is the lower pitch strings. Just work from your root on, say, string 3 up. Because everything else, all the other notes will have been covered on the pattern closer to the nut anyway. Also, I want to mention, there's nothing special about the minor pentatonic scale. You can apply this exact same thought process to any scale or any mode because they all work the same. They're all just one pattern over and over and over. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the pentatonic scale that has 5 notes, or the blues scale that has 6 notes, or a diatonic scale that has 7 notes. And I want to thank you for watching, and I hope I haven't embarrassed myself too much in this video.